With New Orleans Saints training camp now less than a week away, now would be the perfect time to see some superstars cleared for camp, and it looks like we're heading that direction. We got all that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Wednesday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available on all podcast apps, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over at USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And Locked On Who Dat's on today's episode, we're looking at Alontae Taylor signing his rookie deal, what it means for the team, why it took this long. Michael Thomas with some good news on the horizon, trending upwards in terms of his health, and Jameis Winston reportedly either about to be or now cleared ahead of training camp. That's where we're going to start off with today. It's going to be, of course, the quarterback, Jameis Winston. The biggest piece of news that the New Orleans Saints could receive ahead of training camp is that Jameis Winston is officially cleared and ready to go. And that's basically where we are at this time. I think maybe it can be said in more plainer terms just for additional clarification for anybody that's wondering out there. But according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, it looks like Jameis Winston is on track to be ready to go for camp effectively. It was an interesting thing. He was kind of talking about how like the expectation is optimistic and that things are on the right track, but then also at the bottom of the screen in what's called the lower third, because it's in the lower third of your screen, they basically said Jameis Winston cleared for training camp. So, you know, it could be said in more plainer terms, but either way, it's really, really good news for the New Orleans Saints because you already had Jameis Winston in the building and present for things like rookie minis, OTAs, mandatory minis, and as Ian Rappaport kind of mentioned, he didn't really seem that limited. Nick Underhill talking about that as well all throughout those weeks that Jameis was present, and not only present, but participating. Now, he didn't do a lot of 11 on 11s. He didn't throw on the run. He didn't do bootlegs, things like that. But he was very transparent about where he was in his recovery process and sort of has been this entire offseason, hasn't he? I mean, he's been in a situation here to where he's been recovering from this ACL injury, but somehow, unlike other players across other teams, we know every step of the way about where Jameis Winston has been over the course of this offseason. So we recently saw the left knee brace come off. We saw that in a video from Real Supernola during some of Jameis's workouts and things like that. And then now we're hearing that he is either medically cleared or about to be medically cleared in time for camp, which is huge for the New Orleans Saints. They'll be able to go out there day one with their quarterback, calling the shots. He's actually already there. He was leading the classroom during rookie minis and after rookies reported on Tuesday. So you already see him continuing to establish that leadership role. Now he gets to go out there and actually execute and participate on the football field with them at a full capacity once training camp gets started. So that's really, really good news. It will be interesting to see if maybe they do if they take it easy with him a little bit, if he only takes a certain number of reps, maybe he's on a little bit of a rep count early on in training camp or something like that. And then they let Andy Dalton kind of get the wealth of the work during that time, which is still of quality for the New Orleans Saints. Andy Dalton is still a starting caliber NFL quarterback in the league and will be able to execute the offense, which is really the most important thing. He's not going to have the arm that Jameis Winston has. It's not going to be as valuable as working with Jameis Winston, but it would still be of value in terms of installing the offense. So there's no real need to kind of rush Jameis Winston at all, but if he's cleared and ready to go and he's 100% and he's full on, I think you're going to have to fight him to keep him off the field, honestly. Like, we know how much he has missed. As he mentioned, it wasn't just that he missed football, it was that he missed playing football. So even while he had access to football during his time after the ACL injury, it wasn't the same for him. He wanted to be out there on the field. He wanted to be executing. He wanted to be a part of what his teammates were doing. So I think you're going to be hard pressed to keep him off the field at this point, which is effectively what you've seen throughout OTAs and even mandatory minicamps as well. Now, there's no question here that this is Jameis Winston's team, and so the more time that he and Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen get to work with the receivers, with Alvin Kamara, with the offensive line to get the offense installed with the guy that's going to be calling the shots throughout the season and throwing the passes throughout the season, that's obviously of heightened value at this point. So it was great that he was able to participate in all of those other portions of camp, or the offseason training activities. But now that we're coming into training camp, the work gets started. And I asked Chris Olave the other day about how he's taken on to the playbook, or how is the playbook. And the first thing he said to me was, it's long. And so that's another reason for Jameis, of course, to be out there and working with all of these guys to help make sure that everybody is understanding step by step, especially with the new faces on the offense. Guys like Trevor Penning, guys like James Hurst stepping into a starting role, who probably has a pretty good grasp of the playbook already, but still working with Jameis would be, working with Jameis from a new position. You're going to have to learn something a little different there. Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry, of course, is a part of that, as well as newcomers to the system. To have the guy that has been there now for the past couple of years, learning that system, got time to learn it from Sean Payton, had time to learn it from Drew Brees, he effectively becomes part of the teaching staff for that system. So great to have him out on the field. Great news for the New Orleans Saints to see that he is expected to be cleared ahead of training camp and available once the Saints take the field. And by the way, just to kind of add a little something here about the Andy Dalton take, about the idea of him being able to work with the rest of the offense, how great is it for those second and third team players that they get to work with a guy like Andy Dalton, right? And that Jameis has a guy like Andy Dalton to come off the field to during games and have an impact in terms of here's what I'm seeing from the sideline, all of that. You can read more about that. I wrote about it over at saintswire.usatoday.com. This is definitely Jameis Winston's team, but Andy Dalton does bring a unique value as sort of that Chase Daniel, Luke McCown, even Teddy Bridgewater to an extent, guy on the sideline to help you kind of coach through and talk through everything that you're seeing on the field. So some real value there in terms of seeing Andy Dalton, but I think Jameis is going to want the ball in his hands more than anyone else's, and that completely makes sense to me. And speaking of getting the ball over to somebody's hands, you're going to want to get that football over to Michael Thomas's hands, and you're going to want to do it as quickly as possible. And it seems that things are trending in the right direction for him to hit the training camp field eventually as well. We'll talk about that timeline as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And when it comes to Michael Thomas, don't forget that he is right now top 3 in terms of odds for comeback player of the year in 2022. Jameis Winston leading the way there. But what if Jameis Winston wins like offensive player of the year? Does that open up an opportunity for Michael Thomas to win comeback player of the year? Because if Jameis is producing like that, someone's got to be the benefactor of it. So you can look at all of those end of year awards, including offensive rookie of the year, where Chris Olave is on that list, still tied for second at the moment. Win totals. You can also look at point spreads for 3 of the first 4 games already across the NFL as well for the New Orleans Saints and otherwise. So you can go and check all of that out with our friends over at BetOnline, the number one source that you need for all of your sports wagering information and all of your sports wagering trends, action, everything that you're going to be looking for. You can find them on your mobile device or on your laptop. Just head over today to get in on all of that action. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Who Dat Nation, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are all over the place. We are on every podcast app and on YouTube as well. With the big news today around Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas, and these guys expected to be cleared. We're pushing my interview with Robert Brock to tomorrow, so that'll be Thursday's episode. And then we've got Luke Johnson coming either Friday or Monday as well. So lots of reasons to stick around here throughout the week as we get closer and closer to training camp. And of course, as we get closer and closer to training camp as well, make sure you're checking out that NFL top 50 most valuable players list that we have going on over at the Locked On NFL podcast, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Which players move the lines the most? The odds makers over at BetOnline help us figure out who the top 50 most valuable players in terms of betting lines are going into 2022. Now, with training camp right around the corner, the Saints got some big news, or maybe are getting some big news soon around Jameis Winston being medically cleared for camp. Again, that NFL report was a little kind of wonky, but either way, good news for the Saints that day one, Jameis Winston should be fully cleared and available. We knew that he was going to be there, right? We've already seen that, but being fully cleared is a whole other thing. The next piece of that puzzle is how quickly can the New Orleans Saints get back Michael Thomas? And it seems that is trending in the right direction as well. According to Ian Rappaport, we should expect to see Michael Thomas getting cleared sometime early in camp. Now, this goes along with exactly what we have discussed over the course of the past few weeks, not to expect Michael Thomas on March 27th to be full go, to be out there on March 27th. What am I? July 27th, not to be full go, right? Not to be a guy that's going to go out there and immediately start taking snaps, immediately start handling the ball, immediately running routes at full speed, all of that, or taking 100% of snaps even. That's not going to be the reality for Michael Thomas early on. There's going to be a bit of a ramp up period, which is going to effectively be the end of his rehabilitation process, right? Getting him out on the field and getting a look at how he is doing to see if there's anything else that they need to address, or if he's ready to get started and he's ready to be medically cleared. It's kind of like what Sheldon Rankins explained years and years ago when he was coming off of that Achilles injury, and he came back mighty fast from it. But one of the things that he talked about was that after a certain point, you do all the exercising, you do all the rehabilitation, you do all of the rebuilding the muscle around the ligament, all these things, right? You do all of these things, but eventually the only thing left is to get out on the football field. And I think that's where Michael Thomas is very nearly at. He's very close to that spot to where it's like the only thing left is to get him out on the football field. But that doesn't mean get out on the football field full steam, full, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Full head of steam. Yeah, full head of steam, right? Yeah, that one escaped me for a second. But it's not like he's going to get out there and do it that way, right? You're going to get him out there. You're going to get a look at him out on that football field first and then make sure that he is good. But either way, getting cleared early on in camp means that things like the joint practices, preseason games, preseason practices, all of that, you still have before you get to week 1 on September 11th against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. And as long as Michael Thomas is wearing his number 13 jersey and he's lined up at the X receiver position on September 11th against the Atlanta Falcons, and Jameis Winston is in his number 2 jersey taking snaps from Eric McCoy under center, that's where the New Orleans Saints want to be. So giving Michael Thomas a little bit of extra time at the beginning of training camp is not a disappointment. It is the right thing to do. So don't expect him to be out there full go right away. He could be. It could happen, right? We've seen a very dedicated Michael Thomas. He's been on the same page with Dennis Allen all offseason. He's been in the facility working and working and working. You can tell there's a little bit of a hunger for him to get back out on the field. I wouldn't even say a little bit. There's a ton of it. You can see all of those elements are a part of what sort of Michael Thomas is right now. So now the next piece to it is just getting him out on the field. And I think if you can do that, knowing that everything else is aligned, you're going to get a really, really good Michael Thomas in 2022. And again, he doesn't have to get back to 2019 record-breaking level of production. He can be his 2016 rookie self and still be of massive value to the New Orleans Saints, especially compared to what they had or didn't have last year. So we're watching Michael Thomas slowly make his way back, or not slowly, but make his way back. And the Saints will go as slowly as needed throughout training camp, considering you still have a lot of lead-in time before you actually get to week 1, which is where it's most important to have big number 13 back out on the field. The question will be, is he going to be able to be the same player or as dominant a player, right? Again, he doesn't have to be that record-breaking guy again, but is he going to be as dominant a route runner? Is he going to be as dominant a physical receiver as he has been in his past? And can he stay healthy throughout the season? Or is that ankle injury going to be something that kind of rears its ugly head after a point? Now, he's far removed from when the injury happened, but there were surgeries, there's recovery, there's all these other parts of it. So we'll have to see exactly what he's able to put together over the course of the season. But if you can get 16, 17 games out of him, you know he's going to make an impact for your team. And it's one of those situations where, while I don't ever really feel good about this, that 80% Michael Thomas is better than your, top receiver that you're going to put out there either way. You want him to be at 100% or as close to 100% as an NFL football player can be post week 1. But regardless, him being out on that field, massively beneficial for Jarvis Landry, massively beneficial for Chris Olave, massively beneficial for the offensive line, because you can take a snap, hit him on a slant, hit him on an out, hit him on a quick in, and that offensive line gets a little bit of a break, right? You're not having to go full reps. You're able to get that quick passing game going for Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas. And it's of massive value, of course, for Jameis Winston. Heck, it even makes Alvin Kamara's job a little bit easier if he's rushing to the outside, because Michael Thomas is such a good perimeter run blocker. I mean, the guy changes your offense and he changes the team. So be cautious. New Orleans, take the time that is necessary in terms of getting Michael Thomas back out on that training camp field. Just make sure that he's ready to go week 1, which would be the most important part for him. But all things trending upwards for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to health, particularly at the 2 most important, or really 3 most important players. Will Lutz, we already know, is back. Jarvis Landry. Jameis Winston is right there, if not cleared already. And then Michael Thomas is expected to be cleared early on in camp. And the New Orleans Saints also got some good news over on the defensive side as well, with their rookie class now officially being signed. Alontae Taylor signed his contract. What took so long? What was the process and what was the timeline? We'll break all of that down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it locked on Who Dats. We are wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Appreciate you as always for being here with the show. Trying to incorporate Locked On Who Dats in, since like all of y'all have been here and locked in over the course of the offseason. So I want to make sure I'm giving you these shout outs and shouting out the family as a whole as well. But man, this has been a very, very interesting and sort of fun offseason so far. If you didn't catch it in yesterday's episode, got an opportunity to have a quick conversation with Chris Olave following a city council meeting, some of the things he's hoping to get done here in terms of community service, in terms of community engagement here in the city of New Orleans. Also spoke to him a bit about his connection with Michael Thomas, what the workouts with Jameis Winston have been like, all of that. So you can catch that in yesterday's Locked On Saints as well. Let's go back to that Tuesday episode. Today, we're breaking down a bunch of good news for the New Orleans Saints as they head into training camp, which is exactly what you want to do. It's kind of nice seeing these like national reports of like Ian Rappaport and all these other folks that are popping up, and seeing the New Orleans Saints hashtag and being like, oh no, what's going on, right? Is kind of the feeling that you get sometimes. But now things have been good, right? After last season with all of the injuries and things like that, maybe you get a little bit kind of like, you know, a little shy around the idea of like, oh no, news is popping up about the Saints. But so far, so good for New Orleans heading into training camp. Peyton Turner cleared, Will Lutz cleared, Jameis Winston cleared or about to be cleared. Michael Thomas is going to be cleared early on in camp. And you got one other good piece of news as well, something that a lot of folks have been asking about and that we've talked about and broken down here on the show in terms of the expectation of a timeline for Alontae Taylor's contract. It's now signed. So this is now all done. It's been put to rest. And this is good news for New Orleans because Alontae Taylor could serve a large role for this team in 2022. So when you look at where everything started with Alontae Taylor, it goes all the way back to draft night when he was drafted in the second round by the New Orleans Saints day 2. And sort of the way that people looked at him, I know that I assumed that he would be stepping into a safety role. A lot of other folks assumed that he'd be stepping into a special teams role. And so Dennis Allen kind of talked about it after, you know, that day of the draft and his post-draft interview for that day, mentioning that Alontae Taylor was probably going to be somebody that can be a very good special teamer for them, sure, but will also compete at cornerback. And those are two very different sets of expectations, not only for the team, but also for the player and for the player's representation in terms of what that paycheck might look like, right? A second contract for a special teamer is going to be very different than a second contract for a starting cornerback. And so because of that, I don't blame this representative team, his agents, all these folks, for making sure that they got more guaranteed money. And that seems to be what the holdup was, according to Nick Underhill, New Orleans.football, that the New Orleans Saints and the Alontae Taylor's team, remember Alontae Taylor isn't the one that's pushing this stuff, right? He has a team of people that's taking care of that for him. He's got agents, representatives, all of that. But his team were kind of going back and forth a little bit about hashing out the language around guaranteed money. And when you hear that, you assume the player's team wants more guaranteed money, and then the team, the organization, wants to bring that down a little bit. So it makes perfect sense. If that's the case, you look at sort of the disparity between the two different contracts, a possibility for Alontae Taylor, special teams and corner, that yeah, go ahead and get as much guaranteed money in the first contract as you can, just in case the second contract isn't what you hope that it is. Now, that's going to be a very fun battle to watch, really pair of battles to watch all throughout camp. The cornerback battle between Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, and you got to throw Bradley Roby in there too, I would imagine. And then the gunner battle opposite JT Gray, which Alontae Taylor will also be involved in. Look for other guys like Smoke Monday and Bryce Thompson to be a part of that as well, including and there will be other guys that will get some run there too. But all of those pieces for the New Orleans Saints, those are so variable for the player, for Alontae Taylor, that I don't think that the team, that the representatives are doing the wrong thing by saying, okay, well, let's get as much out of the first contract as we can just in case. I don't blame them for that at all. So the next piece, now that you've got Alontae Taylor, the contract is signed, you now have all rookies on your team signed. And remember, Alontae Taylor wasn't the last one. It wasn't like he was the only player holding out in terms of, or not holding out. Sorry, I don't want to say that because that's legal language. But you know, it wasn't like he wasn't the last player out there that hadn't signed, like Desmond Ridder from across the division with the Falcons. He signed his contract yesterday and stuff like that too. So it's not out of the ordinary for somebody to sign their rookie deal this late, and waiting until they report for training camp makes sense because, hey, you're here in the building. Let's get this contract signed. And that's usually the way that it would work out. Okay. So good news again for the New Orleans Saints. A little bit of bad news. Undrafted free agent wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, somebody we just talked about in yesterday's episode, unfortunately added to the non-football injury list. We'll see if he's able to come off of that list in time to still participate in any of the offseason training camp stuff. But usually when somebody goes on this list, you don't really see them for the first season. So we'll see what happens, though. There's still time to sort of figure everything out, unless we learn that, hey, it's a non-football injury list because he tore an ACL or tore an Achilles, right? What would be a season-ending injury while getting ready for camp. That just means that whatever the injury was, it happened away from the team facility. It happened away from the NFL's version of football. It could have happened with him training to get ready for camp. Noah Spence a couple years ago, for instance, had that situation happen to him. So we'll see what more details come out around Weber State wide receiver and kicker returner Rashid Shaheed. Hopefully we'll see him at some point over the course of the off season, whether it be with the Saints or with another team, because you hate to see somebody have that opportunity squashed before they really even get it, right? Before they even come into camp. So fingers crossed for the guy. All right, before we wrap up here, I just want to let you know, Locked on Saints, Ross Jackson, Crescent City Sports, all of that, fully credentialed for the 2022 New Orleans Saints season. That's huge for me to be able to say. I'm very excited to be able to announce it. You're the first people that are hearing it, aside from the couple people that I texted the other day when I got the news. But this is exactly what we had hoped for. This is exactly what we had. I'm not gonna lie, what I expected, right? I thought that we were in this place. I thought this is where we were, and it is where we are. So thank you very much for helping us get there together, because you, the listener, make this show. This is your show just as much as it is my show. And so we're gonna be there. We'll be there for training camp, practices, home games, away games, London, all of it. So we'll have it all covered. We'll have locker room access. We'll be able to bring you some video and everything here on the show from any interviews. Won't be able to do training camp video or drills or anything like that. They don't allow us to do that, but we can certainly do some video from locker room conversations and things like that. So we'll have a lot of good stuff coming up here all throughout the season, and I hope that you're ready. I hope that you are ready, because I absolutely am. Bring you the best content possible, and a lot of it over the course of training camp and getting into that 2022 New Orleans Saints season, which is sure to be a very, very fun one. So a lot of good news for the New Orleans Saints going into training camp, a lot of good news for the show going into this NFL season as well. So thank you again for everything that you've done to help us get here. Coming up on tomorrow's episode, Robert Brock. We're going to get to him. NFL agent, Plan 365, Dejon Dixon's representative as well. He's going to be with us to talk a little bit about building an agency, coming from the city of New Orleans, repping the city of New Orleans, and what the expectations are around Dejon. So very excited to bring that interview to you tomorrow for Thursday's episode. I appreciate you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day, every day here on the show. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out that Locked On NFL podcast. It's Wednesday, which means it's always a lot of fun. Tony Wiggins, James Rapine, they're going to be giving you everything you need to know about that top 50 NFL most valuable players list, including Jameis Winston's rank breaks on this episode as well. We'll highlight that a little bit later this week. Also, I appreciate y'all, as always, making me a part of your day. If you see me, say hi. And don't forget, for everything you need in between these episodes, make sure you follow along on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.